Well. So this year we got Friday the 13th and Valentine's Day on the same week. So love is never just about the other person. In psychoanalysis, it is also about the ghost, desires, and unfinished stories we bring with us. So
I
it's gonna
think
be scary.
I think Ghost is probably the common point between Friday the 13th and 14th of February. So I think it's there are definitely a lot of ghosts to talk about today. So let's confront your trouble.
And make conscious the unconscious.
Hi, this is Josh.
And this is Santi. Welcome to this session in the Mind Quest.
For today, I thought we could look at one of the first topics that I remember when I joined university. I was curious about, like what psychology had to say, what psychoanalysis had to say, and that is love. I always found it like curious to see how psychology understood love. So there's a lot to say. Kind of this is the common theme, but when we look at how it was thought of originally for psychoanalysis, what Freud done, and how that transformed into what we understand now today as how love works and what modern psychoanalysts would say about love. So yeah, that's kind of the plan for today.
So I've been doing my research and I crash around a lot of words and stuff that actually hits me hard. So there are things like attachment and repetition and desire and more than an emotion from, I don't know, something like the foundation on which the idea of love is framed actually. I think the first steps today should be just going through those points, like understanding the concepts behind these terms that are common in psychoanalysis, but somehow they feel like rush, maybe I don't know, like hard to swallow. They're complex terms and sometimes make you feel like the idea you got of love is somehow wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're the one who's gonna tell me more or less, but I read this thing that's a heavier question behind the idea. You're not asking for who you love, but well, something a little more dark in there that's really connected to you.
Yeah. Okay. So spoiler. It doesn't get any more brighter than this until we get to the end of and talk about like modern psychoanalysis. But about it there, it gets really, really, really dark. So yeah, and I agree. I think in general, talking about love is a prickly subject because, like you said, like it faces you with a lot of questions that maybe you hadn't asked before, and maybe the answer isn't what you would have expected. I think in many ways there is this push in society toward not think about love, just fall in love in the train station and just go with your heart. But love has to be a process like everything else in psychology, right? If we look at depression, if we look at happiness, if we look at stress, if we look at I don't know, memory, if we look at intelligence, if we look at our relationships with I don't know, with food, why wouldn't we look at love and the relationship with other people? Throughout today, love refers to all kinds of love, from friendly love, family love, romantic love, all of those. We will probably use romantic love as the example, but a lot of the mechanisms we'll talk about appear in love as a general form. That's kind of the first psychoanalytic, I don't know if discovery or invention, but the idea that there is a fundamental form of psychic energy. I think Freud does say it like that, but it's probably Anga or Melanie who will say later like this. There is this certain psychic energy that we assign to things, to people, to relationships, to whatever. I think we have talked about this before earlier. I don't remember what episode it was, but I probably used this example from The Little Prince, where the fox explains that until they start knowing each other and having sort of a contact and relationship and a name, they are just one fox and just one kid. But when they become closer, when the kid, if the kid tames the fox, then that fox will become unique for that kid in all the world, and that kid will become unique to the fox in all the world. So this is what I would say, or rather, this is an example, and produced with an example of sort of moving psychic energy around, where out of all the foxes, out of all the people out there, out of all the hobbies, out of all the members in my family, I choose. We'll look into another one later. I choose this in particular. I like this one in particular. This one in particular means something to me that the rest don't. This relationship, this person, this human, this family member, these they're objects too, right? So it could be this jacket, my favorite jacket. It could be this animal, my pet, right? So they become unique. So what Freud would say is that this process, where these things become unique to you, is you putting your psychic energy into those things. And we will look a little bit further into what this psychic energy actually is as we go into, like, Freud doesn't really know what it is, right? I think I've said this before. He's trying to just explain something that he's sort of discovering but doesn't have words for. So he will use the word libido. And again, the logic here is the following. This is the energy that pushes life forward. This is the energy that pushes humans forward to keep living and not just die out of starvation or let the race go extinct. So Freud says, so that fundamental energy in other animals is to reproduce. So it has to be in humans as well. So that's why Freud uses the word libido and the figures of sex as words to explain this energy that he is trying to describe. Like I said before, it will be Anga Freud and it will be Megan Klein for some of his disciples who will actually describe this more in terms of this psychic energy, of this investment of meaning, of this investment of love, of caring about something, or of different symbols that make this one different from all the other ones. So that's kind of the idea there of love, right? And when I say love, I'm talking about all forms of love, but we will refer to love, in particular romantic love, because it's probably the most spicy one. So yeah, and inside this relationship and inside these ideas, you have these terms like repetition, like attachment, like desire. We will probably talk about them individually as we go along. But again, just keep in mind that these are not necessarily the everyday terms of attachment. This is probably the psychoanalytic definition of attachment, which in this case is sort of the way the relationships work or whatever. We will look into that because this comes later with others, but this is kind of where Freud is at the beginning. He's just trying to explain why are some things and people special to us, and his answer is because when we spend enough time with these things or objects, we start putting some of ourselves into these objects. And that psychic energy is what makes them special. This is what makes this dog my dog, this cat my cat, this one makes this wife my wife. That's the idea.
Okay. So, a part of the interesting concepts, there are also this stuff I found out that's like projection or transference love. Like, I don't know, it sounded to me like transactional. And I get the idea that it's more or less the same thing. Idealization and this cycle of devaluation or the erotization of lack.
Yeah.
And fantasizing. So really, my head was feeling terrible. It was like, okay, so these guys actually find out that there are a lot of ideas related to love, but um, so it's not a feeling like per se. And well, I think that understanding what questions actually are asked during the process to find out what's going on with this you call love, it is the way you actually find out in, I don't know, inside the analysis that you're doing to a person, or the process of the well, it's not necessarily, it's not therapy, but it's like in an investigation process that you proceed, right? um, I mean, you, as a psychoanalyst, you manage to assemble like a dynamic structure of the topic of love, I mean, and that is like readjusting, like different gears that fitting and change position, something like that. So somehow it sounds like organizing to predict a result, an outcome of a relationship.
Yes, but I would describe it as unveiling the machinery rather than as putting something together. That's the difference. I would say it's more about looking at something that's already there. And that,
Yeah,
yes, if it moves
not
the
like
same way, it
you
will
are
produce the
building
same
it,
result.
but or like finding out which gears are actually inside.
The thing is that psychoanalysis ideally should be able to find this in anyone. So Freud is trying to describe sort of the infancy or the first relations of all human beings. Well, probably doesn't literally apply to every single living human being.
Okay.
But they should be common, for example, for the West, right? For Western, generally advanced societies, right? Like that's kind of the idea here. So I don't know if probably not. If you could find the different stages of sexual development in children in native tribes in Africa, I don't know. But Freud wasn't talking about that. He had never set foot I don't know if in the continent, but definitely not in the anthropological work to have that kind of authority. Jung, one of his disciples, has more of that world experience, and that's why he sort of turns on Freud. But Freud is definitely not talking about that. For Freud, the world is Western white people. So yeah, that's absolutely. Let's be clear about that. Yes.
Okay. So, and well, I think the last part that we need to connect is how it is working nowadays. Yeah,
Mm-mm.
modern integrations of the stuff. So, with that in mind, how we start this session? Are
Mm-mm.
we starting today?
Mm-mm. So
Okay, so
yeah, okay.
let me go on with this line of thought because, well, as they say, it really hits when it where it hurts.
Yes.
Reading about this in psychoanalysis, yeah.
Yes.
For me, love have always been a decision.
Mhm.
It's not something that is happening in your mind. It's something you choose to do.
Mhm.
So, and more or less, it gets a lot of cultural background because it has to do with my profile as Catholic and how I choose to do things at the end.
Mhm.
So, uh, and this decision actually involves many other things like caring and supporting and, I don't know, valuing and respecting despite you fill in the blank, whatever. I don't know, beyond any differences you could have with your partners or your friends or whoever it is that you are loving, you're deciding to do it. And but then I start reading this stuff, and I do remember reading them a long time ago at university for something related to, I don't know, maybe it was surrealism because it's somehow attached. And you find out this about attachment structures, yeah, and projection and repetition and the desire. and that there is also a factor linked to your selfishness. I mean, when when they ask, this is the question I was talking about earlier, and it's something about, I don't know, it's like piercing question. It is, what am I loving about myself through
Mm.
others? It's like, okay, wait. So it's not really that I'm looking at that person in front of me. It's actually I'm looking something that it reflects, or he or she or whatever it is reflecting from me
Mhm.
through them.
Mhm.
I don't know what to think about this. So,
Okay, you're doing good.
uh,
You're doing good. So far, you definitely read Freud. Yes, you're doing good. Yes, yeah. That's Freud's
so
perspective. Yes.
why do we start by first understanding the concept of love as actually psychoanalysis handle it?
Mhm.
Because, okay, concepts may vary, so results may vary in this kind of approach. Tell me, what is it for psychoanalysis?
I actually have some notes here because this was a tough one. Okay. So let's begin with, yes, I agree. 100%. As you were talking, I was thinking the same thing. Um, let's start with kind of the basis of what we're seeing when we mean love, right? So, again, kind of going back to Freud, right? For him, the point of love is that it is pleasurable. I mean, there's like a lot of explanation in between. But the summary is, for Freud, the reason love exists is that it is pleasurable. It gives us something that by yourself we cannot just have, right? Like I am an individual. By my very existence as a limited being, I, I cannot experience like that other person. So the connection of our relationship sort of depends on that other person being present. And this experience is something that, I mean, that I cannot have by myself. So I would say the function of love is to feel this pleasurable experience of being in love. And then what Freud would say is, and love, like I said before, is that displacement of sucking energy of the things that you care about, of meaning, of important things, into this person, this object, this relationship, whatever. I think it's interesting to think about whether or not this is an election or a decision. Because Freud would say this is something that babies do. For Freud, for example, there is a love, even if before there is like a concept of this is my mom, there is a love of this thing that fits me. But there is a love of this pleasurable emotion of having my hunger satisfied, of being warm, cuddly. Maybe I hear like some pleasant noises, that's my mom's voice. So Freud would say there is a love there, like the infant loves that object, that experience, that whatever. That way they get sad if mom goes away. So um, and I think and that is where sort of Freud's definition ends. So Freud really doesn't concern himself with what love looks like in practice. So Freud wouldn't say, oh, like talking to somebody every day and buying them things with love. Freud doesn't care about it. All Freud cares about is the internal process that's going on that leads you to enact love in whatever way you want to enact that. In whatever way you in your culture, you in your experience, you as a person, you in your family, enact that love. But Freud is trying to understand what is the mechanism that leads to that enactment. So when I choose to buy a bucket of flowers for my girlfriend, why did I choose to buy a bucket of flowers? Why did I buy anything at all? Why did I buy flowers? That is kind of what Freud is trying to understand, the mechanisms of love. And he would define love, like I said, as this displacement of sucking energy, of meaning into object things. And for Freud, when we look at the modern view, but for Freud, he would say we do this because we want the pleasure. So we are trying to get the pleasurable emotion for this. Like I said, Freud is pretty dark. One of the quotes I have here is, for Freud, love is always somewhat delusional. It's almost like some sort of mental illness. Because the object is sort of overvalued. It is seen as more than it actually is. We would say love is blind, right? Now we're talking about romantic love. Love is blind, right? We're willing to overlook things that maybe other people we wouldn't have overlooked. Idealized at the screen for projected wishes, and it was the other thing that you were asking, right? Like it is really me putting something out there. The reason Freud says that is because this overvaluation, this idealization, that comes from you. You know what I mean? Like, in whatever way love is blind, that blindness is coming from you. What you're being blind to is in the other person. But what you're being blind to is from you. So that's why Freud says it comes from you. Because you're the one that is blind, that is ignoring, that is in love. Right? And that's why Freud would say it's like a mental illness. Because normally we don't do this. So Freud would describe this as an impoverishment of the ego, as the ego losing or seeing itself as less. And that person completes me. This object completes me. My passion completes me. My family completes me. So I am less. And they are, he is, she is, it is what I need, what I'm missing, what I am. Right? However, and this is where it kind of starts getting better, Freud would say love is also the thing that holds society together. And it is the reason that we are willing to not behave like animals is because love is worth it. So if you think of the social contract of the fact that if I go to Costco, I have to actually stay in line and pay for the groceries, I cannot just walk out with whatever I want. The reason why I do that is because the relationships that I get to keep by being a civilized human being are worth more than the pleasure of just grabbing food and eating it right there and then. So that's kind of the logic here. That the reason that the reason that we have this social contract, and the reason that we have a civilization in the first place is so that we can love each other. Because otherwise we would be in perpetual competition like other animals in the wild who cannot speak. But this is what love is for Freud. Like this displacement of psychic energy that involves some sort of delusion of where the other is seen as more than it is and you see yourself as less than you are. But in that sort of organization there is enjoyment and pleasure, and that's where the libido flows, Freud would say. I don't know if this answers the question of what is love?
Yeah, sort of. It still hits with these other things like attachment and just desire. That I mean, they should be. Is that audible?
No, not very much. I don't hear anything.
Okay, yeah. Somebody is not loving their neighbors around here, so. But I mean, okay, so love is this kind of situation in your mind that you're like delusional somehow, but organized anyway.
Yeah, for Freud. We will look at the modern.
For Freud, yeah, for Freud. Let's keep it in for Freud because that's important. What happens with all these other words like attachment and desire, and how he actually connects with this idea of, okay, you're a little delusional but organized, and anyways, I think it is sort of an attachment to this person due to this or that reason, or maybe you just want her body or his body, or I don't know. So desire, and what are the other repetition? I don't get this idea of repetitions.
Yeah. No, this is a really good question. And I don't know if you did it for purpose, but these are actually the concepts that sort of build on Freud from his disciples. But this is a really, really good question. Okay. But let's think of attachments first. No, sorry. Let's think of repetition, because I think that's sort of where it begins to bridge into modern views. So like I said, remember what I said earlier about maybe it's loving, right? So maybe if we get to love whatever first experience or whatever they have of the thing that fits them, right? And then as they grow older and they sort of begin to understand, this is another human being, this is not me, this is my mom, this is my dad, this is my caretaker, they come to me whenever I'm hungry, oh, cool. Again, in that love sort of begins to appear. Like they begin to find these, again, pleasure in this relationship with another human being. At this point, this is not a delusion because you are a baby. So you literally cannot exist without this other person. So this at this point is not a delusion. This is the situation. This is the reality of you as an infant. So Freud would say, and this is where we start moving into attachment, but we're still in repetition. So Freud would say, these first relationships, right, as we start growing older, as the world becomes larger, right, we start, oh, there's other people. There is my dad. Maybe I have siblings. Maybe I have extended family. Maybe, yeah, I start going to school. I start meeting other people. And Freud would say, these first forms of love, these first relationships, they become sort of like a model for how our relationships will be in the future. So, this is the typical example. So if I grew up in a family where I am told that my needs are not important and I should take care of my parents and they are the only things that matter because I'm the last daughter in this family and I have to take care of them, even if, I rebel and get out of the family, I may keep the idea that the way relationships work is by not taking care of yourself and sacrificing everything for the other person. So it's no longer like, I'm not doing this with my parents, I understood that was bad for me, but when I'm married, I am doing this with my husband. That depends on the person and the relationship. But the idea is that there is a repetition of that primordial relationship. The patterns that were learned, Freud wouldn't say learned. Freud is psychoanalyst. I am using sort of more modern behavioral cognitive words. The patterns that were learned during infancy become these sort of primordial highways that are a lot harder to sort of untangle than the things you learn later in life. So this is in modern psychology, right? I'm talking about years ago. But this is what Freud observes, right? He notices that relationships we have as adults model these primordial relationships just a little bit more complexly. So whenever psychoanalysis talks about repetition, and this is one of the concepts that actually endures up until today, and that has also been incorporated into like CBT and cognitive behavioral therapy, we repeat the same mistakes. We look for the same kind of people. In many ways, the logic of growing up is that we are trying to sort of not make the same mistake. We are trying to, this time, I won't be consumed by taking care of the other person. This time, I won't get crazy jealous and, count them away. This time, I won't let my depression get in the way. At the end, it happens again. It happens again. It happens again. That is what Freud says when he's talking about repetition. That primordial models of relationships, of attachments, of ways of interacting, become a lot harder to displace and usually become so hard to displace that we repeat them over and over through our lives. So that's the idea behind repetition. And I would say that love is very often a repetition. And this is where you want to fuck your mom comes in. No, that's not what Freud is saying. What Freud is saying is that the model that you learn of relations that you learn at home, you will repeat with your other relationships outside the home. So that's what Freud is saying. And that includes loving. So the first form of love is your mom, or your caretaker, or your maternal figure, we would say in modern psychology. And so that model of love is really, really important. And that's why Freud puts so much emphasis on that first primordial relationship, because it's the first of all of them. Well, Craig would say there's first, like, the thing that's going your mom that only fits you, but whatever, right? It's your mom at the end of the day. Does this mean you need a perfect mom? No. It just means you need a good enough one. That it helps you be, like, takes care of you in a good enough way. There is no perfect one. So So yeah, so that's the idea behind repetition. What was the other one?
So attachment, and I guess it's going through the same road. I mean,
Yeah, so attachment is the
something you
newer term.
receive, right?
Kind of. So attachment is sort of the newer term that builds on what I just explained. So attachment theory sort of categorizes these primordial relationships into different forms of attachment. So you will have things like insecure attachment, like ambivalent attachment. Like I didn't prepare this part for, I didn't think about that, talk about the attachment theory, but this is the modern view of sort of how these primordial relationships work and how they manifest in the rest of your life. So, like I said, it's not, I'm trying to remember the one I have. It escapes me right now. But there's different, like I said, but the idea is that these primordial relationships, these forms of attachment, we repeat them later in life. So if I have an insecure attachment with my first caretakers, odds are I will have an insecure attachment with my partners later in life. Because I learned as a younger person that I don't know, that men, that women, that wives, that husbands cannot be trusted. So now I believe that this motherfucker is going to cheat on me as soon as I turn on my back. Repetition, right? I'm repeating the pattern. Not the same context, but I'm repeating the same pattern. I'm still insecure.
Yeah.
I am still reactive way. That's the idea. So that's how attachment connects to what I said earlier about sort of different primordial relationships.
Okay. So they're going more or less in the same road.
Yes.
Now,
yeah. They are kind of the evolution, let's say.
Now let's take these two old friends we have. You've been already talking about one of those. And I'll present them like this. One is the one most of us can understand when we read them, and the other one is the ununderstandable, not even for those who read him. So Freud and Lacan, right? They established theories on this subject. The first one suggested something along the lines of, yeah, you already mentioned it, repetition, and something like a motor expression. And I mean, like, as if it's driving your actions or the way you're thinking or your procedure somehow. Yeah, it's a guiding expression. The second proposed the idea that love is giving what one does not have. And later, other authors would speak of love as internal object relations, dynamics, or psychoanalytic adjacency, as well as theories of love as object relations or as attachment theory. You already mentioned that one. So let's take it like step by step. I mean, this is all an evolutionary uh, thinking process at some point. Yeah. So for each one of these ideas, and I'm quite interested in this Freud to Lacan pathway
The pipeline.
and this objectivization of the attachment. I mean, what what do we made of all that, and what has actually stayed with us in these modern days that's still like I mean, you're still studying this kind of information, but I mean, not all of it is still being used. So how they actually managed to make them match to modern views, more or less, of all of these.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say, yeah, I think that what you said about the evolutionary tree is a good idea, a good way to look at it, because there are sort of divisions here. For these, the one we're going to talk about right now, I want to say they are sequential. They are like two different ways of looking at how this works. But let's go with Lacan. Lacan sort of he describes himself as a Freudian, and that probably gives you an idea of where he's going with this. So for Lacan, he goes deeper into Freud's idea that sort of love begins with this absence, with this feeling that there is something that you are missing, and trying to find that in somebody else or in objects or in, I mean, like it's heavy shit, but pretty much anything, like objects, people, activities, beliefs. He will say, this thing that we are missing, we begin looking outside of us, in other people. The thing is that that thing does not exist. It's not real. So we cannot find it. So we are from the beginning condemned to not find the thing we're looking for. But that's why love is about giving something you don't have. Because the other person finds in you that object, that kind of exists. Like I said, it's really heavy shit. So I don't want to get too much into Lacan, but the idea is that for him, when we are born, we are in, or rather, we go in the womb, we are in this state of perfect bliss, of like nirvana. All our needs are met, there is no threat to us, like we are just perfect. When we are born, we retain this sort of omnipotence of this, sort of being one with the cosmos for a few seconds, I guess. And as soon as we feel something, as soon as we feel hunger, that illusion breaks. And we realize, oh shit, what do you mean by hunger is not satisfied immediately like when I was in the womb? And that primordial trauma, that first experience of being human, of needing something, of what's missing, that is what sort of puts you on this journey to find that omnipotence, find that perfect nirvana again. But that is not existent. That was you in the womb. So that's why that little object, the object A that you're looking for, does not exist. That's why it's unfindable. So that's why love is a delusion. That's why you when we said earlier, you overvalue the object because you think that person is this. Is this what you were missing to be complete? What you are missing to be happy is that person. But it's not. It's just a delusion. Because what you actually need to be happy either does not exist or is inside you. It's not in the other person. So that's kind of the idea for Lacan. He sort of goes deeper into that notion that love has this function of trying to find pleasure, to try to find happiness. And that's why we love things, that's why we love people, that's why we love activities. But Lacan would say, however, that is a doomed search from the beginning. There is no finding the object because that was lost when you were born, essentially. So that's Lacan. Like that's the most depressing you can get on psychoanalysis out loud. And like I said, it very much follows right with you. These other words we talked about, like attachment, and object relations and stuff like that, I would say they are the other branch. So as sort of Lacan is going deeper into understanding sort of the deepest mechanisms of the unconscious. These other branches of psychoanalysis, these others, are trying to get a little bit closer to cognitive behavioral therapy, to CBT, to neurology, to understanding or connecting these concepts to the concepts that we can observe or measure with the tools of science, right? And so we're talking more about observable behavior. So, for example, we're talking about, like I said earlier, we're talking about attachment theory. We're looking at relationships as adults, right? We're seeing, okay, what are you repeating as an adult? Oh, okay, so let's now go back, connecting to the beginning. So that's kind of the idea there. It starts to get sort of positive a little bit after attachment theory, and I will actually argue this is another branch, where these are the British sort of independent psychoanalyst school. For them, love, and they can start to see love as something else. All right. So for them, love is not the means to pleasure. For them, love is the end. Is the reason why everything else. So, obviously they maintain the idea of like repetition, the idea of like attachment theory. That is maintained. That is part of understanding. But for them, true love, like actual real love, can only happen when that overvalued delusion I have of the object actually breaks. So when I finally have that fight, when I realize This is not a perfect person who completes me and who will change my life and who is everything I needed to be happy. And I can say, okay, but I still love them. I understand them. Okay, I understand that now. But it's cool to be in love. It is nice to have a relationship. I don't need to. I understand now that I don't depend on this, but I like to love. This is the end. There is no something else. There is no, Freud's idea of we are trying to satisfy something. No, this is the end. This is the point. To be able to be part of a society, of a family, of a couple, of a soccer team, of to be able to passionately drive or delve yourself into reading, into writing, into art, into movies. To be able to devote yourself to a cause like climate change, realizing that, yeah, there's a lot of shit in the world, but you can still choose. So this is kind of where it sort of begins to get a little bit less depressive, where the end goal is still kind of to be able to be alone, but to be alone in the presence of others, to sort of have that model that ideally you will get as a child. You would be able to play by yourself with your mom in the room, knowing you are safe. So this is the primordial relationship that ideally you need to find at some point in your life, if you didn't get it when you were a child. That idea of safety, that idea of not having to worry about the environment, of not having to be hyper vigilant of the context. So when sort of these British independents are kind of arguing is that the point is to sort of stop using. In a way, it's kind of the opposite. Yeah, in a way, is to stop using the object and just sort of enjoy the relationship with the object, if that makes sense. Like,
Sort of, if it's a person, but maybe like if you're a collector, right? So
think of it like this:
you just
love
enjoy having it.
people who love Korea. Think of that love and how that love blinds to other. It can blind you to reason, right? So think of that in terms of, yeah, and that's why I say it's probably the opposite. Think of that in terms of a relationship, right? Like this relationship with like Korea is like if the man is, save the country, it's going to save me. Delusion, right? Even if he were a great politician, like he's going to save you, he's going to save the country. Delusion, right? So this view would say sort of the progress in that is to realize, no, fucking Korea is not going to save you or the country or anything like that because he's a corrupt politician. But maybe you still can choose, oh, okay, I understand now. He's a mortal, a human with flaws. I still love Korea. Sure, like that's your choice. But now it's a choice. Now I am not blinded by reason. Now I understand that this is a limited human being. Does that make sense? So now this is an object, a limited thing, just like me. Versus before it was this relation, this delusion of you are so great. We go same thing with romantic relationship. We meet, I have a crush on you, I think you are the best from the West. Everything you do is perfect, I laugh at every joke. But at some point, I have to realize you are not perfect. I have to start seeing, oh shit, turns out this guy doesn't like paying for my food. Oh shit, I don't like that. I like being a princess. Oh shit, look, this guy doesn't like working out. Oh shit, I love going to the gym. So at some point, these breaks appear, right? So the idea is that for that relationship to continue, the delusion has to break completely. There has to be a realization that this is a mortal human being as imperfect as me. And that thing I had was an idea, a dream, a delusion. And when that can happen, then we can have a real relationship as people. Then I can, curiously, and now I can see you as an object, as something limited, as something like me. Now we can engage in equal ground without the delusion of love. And these guys would say that this is actual love. This is the performance of love. What you do when you are in an illusion. When you have another person there with you, that is love. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it ends up being I choose something you choose to do according to this point of view.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think there's an asterisk there. Yes, but for a lot of people, that choice comes at the end of a psychoanalytic process.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so yes,
There's
I
where you
have.
get there.
Exactly. I had a teacher who used to say, psychoanalysis takes 1 minute. You understand and you make the choice. The problem is, it takes weeks, months to get to that 1 minute of the click. But this is the logic here as well. Yes, it is absolutely, at some point you made the choice. That is the point. But being able to make that choice, that's what a lot of people cannot do. And that's the point
Yeah,
of
yeah,
psychoanalysis.
yeah. I connect with that. So
Exactly. Mm-mm.
being conscious of the unconscious idea
Exactly.
of
Exactly.
the
That's
choosing,
literally the
right?
idea. Exactly.
Okay. Now I'd like to address what you call dynamic structures
Mm-hmm.
in love, according to psychoanalysis.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that? But let me go a little further. uh, I've been reading a lot of these clinical questions that are usually used in like psychoanalysis inquiry, such as I don't know, what lack or wound is this attachment trying to repair? Uh, how does one respond? I don't know how to respond to a question like that.
You
So
should.
I mean, I'm sure this is something that the analyst is asking himself while asking me other things in a process, right? In an inquiry. But I mean, it sounds really weird to ask something like that, even if I'm asking it to myself and I'm the one analyzing that. So, but I would like to know what is actually happening behind a question like this.
Hmm?
So I also have this idea of tensions in different ways of viewing love. For example, if there is desire and security, stability may reduce the desire. So, among other proposed relationships, that is in sort of a listing of outcomes and I don't know expressions that could happen between two different persons that actually are giving different or bringing different things to the table of our relationship. And so let's work with these dynamics and tensions ideas because I really would like to understand. So okay, you're asking these really complex questions to yourself to understand your patient. uh, how you manage to answer them, what could a patient told you that will lead you to think, okay, maybe it's this thing, this other.
Okay. Okay, what is a structure or a dynamic structure? So, a dynamic structure is anything. It's just a concept that psychoanalysis sort of proposes to understand either a process or the way we sort of organize information in your head, or to describe something inside our mind in the best way we can, right? Because we cannot actually see the object of the mind. So we have talked about the structures today, like when we talk about the unconscious, the structure of the mind. When I talked about I don't know, when we talk about the ego or the ida, the different shapes of the topography of the mind. The reason it is called psychodynamic is because these different structures sort of push and pull against each other. So on one hand, I have sort of my animalistic instincts, my human animal body that wants things, that wants sex, that wants food, that wants water, that wants to see new things, that wants to fight, that wants to do all of those things. On the other side, you have the superego, This is the internalized voice of society that says, no, you cannot talk on the street, you cannot steal from the shop, you cannot just get up right now and go eat. The superego are the laws, the norms, the structure to the animal. And the third one is you, the speaker. I often say like that, the speaker, and not you, because that I refer specifically to this, not to the whole mind. This is the ego. This is the you that speaks. This is the you that sort of gives a narrative to the thing that these two sides do. Oh, I was angry because I was hungry. I hadn't eaten everything in the morning. That's why I got angry. No, we cannot go there because they close after 5. And it's already 4:30, and I don't want to, make them uncomfortable by going so late at the shop, right? And you are like just building the narratives for all of this. Whether that narrative is true or not, I don't know. Like, that's kind of the point. In many ways, the speaker is just that, a storyteller. But the things it sees are invisible, right? Like, that's their conscious. But the story is kind of a guess on a self-reflection of what I'm doing. So if I say, for example, that I got angry because I hadn't eaten anything all morning, I am saying that because I have seen previous times that this happens. But this is an inference that me, the speaker, is making. Whether or not that is true, I don't know, maybe I was angry at that person that day. So that's kind of the idea. So this is why it's called psychodynamic, and this is why there is tension, because these pull against each other. The speaker constantly trying to sort of build a coherent narrative, and the other forces trying to pull in their own direction. Society wants you to behave perfectly and to be a perfect servant of like society, and they what's the exact opposite. It was to satisfy only its own individual needs and fuck everything else. So those are kind of the structures. So whenever we talk about psychodynamic therapy or psychodynamic theory, what we're talking is about the point where psychoanalysis meets cognitive behavioral therapy, or psychoanalysis meets sort of the branches of psychology that can use the tools of science. So psychodynamic therapy is kind of in the middle. It does its best to use the tools of science to understand the concepts of psychoanalysis. So inside psychodynamic therapy, you have other concepts that, again, not everybody agrees with. This is like a tree. Keep in mind that. So one of these concepts is this idea of these primordial wounds in childhood. I don't like thinking of them like that because it makes it sound like this is something uncommon, wrong, or problematic. For my view, which comes from Freud, this is structural. This happens to everybody, and this is not something that's wrong with you. This is just something that we need to understand. So I don't like, unconsciously, the very recent one, I don't like the use of wound. I prefer using more Freudian terms. But this is one of those. This is, I said earlier how these primordial relationships, or the model later relationships, the idea with these primordial wounds is that these primordial disappointments, or these primordial things that go wrong for you in your childhood, sort of create or will lead to later sort of specific or later predictable outcomes or predictable behaviors. I am not a big fan of that. I do not think it's such an A to B situation, but that's why I don't like this. Well, notice how the speaker keeps coming up with narratives. That's what the speaker does. So I think I don't like it because it makes more sense for me to think of this as something that's structural rather than something that's necessarily broken. But that's what it means. That's why it's reversed. So the question you made was, what lack or wound is this attachment trying to repair? But the idea is that, remember I said earlier that there are different kinds of attachment based on these primordial models, like insecure or whatever. So from this wound's perspective, the reason that attachment is there is because something went wrong and caused this primordial wound. I said earlier that you shouldn't have the answer for that, because this is really Okay, wait. I will say what I want to first later. I'll use Mingwei. This is a very academic discussion. Like this is medical jargon, right? Like this is the neurologist talking to the the pathologist about this article they read. This isn't really something you would say to the client. If you are asking the client this, you are terrible at your job as an analyst or as a therapist, because this is not a client-facing question, right? Like this is like having the guy in finance go down to the cashier and ask him about the current income for the month. Like that doesn't make sense, right? Like these are different contexts where you are talking, right? Like this is the lawyer telling the kid what is agave's corpus is. Like no, like this is you shouldn't have the answer for this because this is not a question for you the client, not even internally. Like if that's what you were told again, that is a misinterpretation of what Freud is saying or what psychoanalysts are saying. This is a question that, like you said earlier, you would use as an analyst to try to understand what's going on for yourself. Even the answer to that question you wouldn't share with the client unless there is a real good argument, a reason to share. This is I have a teacher describe this as casting a net, right? So there are so many psychoanalytic theories, or so many psychoanalytic authors had ideas and concepts, that your job as an analyst is to like have this net of concepts sort of out there. So that as the client is speaking, you may hear something like, this sounds like a wound from childhood. So maybe with this particular client, in this particular session, in this particular conversation, it may be a good idea to talk about childhood wounds. But again, this wouldn't be the first session. This would be us after working for like 3 months. I understand a lot better what's going on. You mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. What do you think? I am presenting it to you. I am putting it on the table for us to look at it. So I have to be sure that you understand what it is. So that's why you would never present it like this, because it makes no sense like this. So that's the thing. Psychoanalysis is a collaborative work. It's like building something together, like putting a puzzle together. So we put things on the table and we both look at it, and it makes sense for that. So I would never give you the. So what childhood wound would you say this has hurt? No, like that's a stupid question.
I got a scratch on my arm. Maybe that's what you're looking for.
Exactly. It's like, no.
Yeah.
And the question you ask depends on what the dynamic, right? And how this dynamic is working, right? So that's kind of the idea. Earlier you mentioned this idea of desire and security and how stability may reduce desire. I don't know where this comes from. I would say this is not a psychoanalytic view. Like for psychoanalysis, desire is a constituent of humanity. Desire is the thing that moves you forward. Without desire, you kill yourself. Because why would you continue to live if you haven't got desire for anything? So you cannot weigh desire, and security doesn't really weigh desire either. No, so I'm not sure where that came from. The view for psychoanalysis is that desire is.
Give you a little back on this because it did call a lot of my attention. They set it as a table. Yeah, and the idea was okay. There is tension between these two, like I don't know, approach to law. So for one person, it is giving security, and for the other one, it was desire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mean like lust? You mean like sexual attraction? Okay.
Yeah, sexual attraction.
Okay. So I was thinking of desire as the psychoanalytic concept of desire. That's different from this lust. So let's just have this.
That's why it was like a little confusing for me too, because okay, is it viewed as psychoanalytic idea or is desire as just sexual tension between two persons?
In this context, this would be completely sexual tension, not psychoanalytic.
Apparently, that was the idea. So they put it like this, and they say, okay, like the outcome might be this, and they say something about I don't know, like stability may reduce desire. So in search for stability, because the one is looking for security or trying to feel secure, and the other one is just looking for, I don't know, sex, maybe. at some point, the relationship may start lacking this desire idea, this sexual tension, and to keep on stability. More or less, that was it. There were a lot of other like relations made like this, like possible outcomes or more possible outcomes, but it sounded a lot like divination stuff.
I was
So
going to say,
that's
the
why I
thing
put
is
it
that
there,
yes.
and it caught a lot of my attention because it sounds like divination, but it sounds also like maybe they're taking a bit of I don't know, psychoanalytic theory, and they're mixing stuff up so they can make this like sound like working, like all those yeah, you know, there's a lot of people that is using like quantum theory to explain stuff that has nothing to do with quantum theory socially, and it's somehow selling because people is looking for something to believe in, and if it sounds scientific, then somehow it's more credible, believable, right? So maybe it was something like that, but it was set up unmixed between the science and not science information.
So I think this is a good example of the delusion of love, where we get into a relationship and I have an illusion of who you are, and you have an illusion of who I am. So after some time, where something happens and there is a break, now I have to decide: do I actually want to continue the relationship or not? And now I have to, for the life like an adult. I would think this is what this example was describing, where when we started, our relationship worked one way, but as we went along, we realized it was never like that. So now we have to do something about it. I would say yes, that was the mechanism we were talking about earlier, where the idea for modern psychoanalysis is that to love, you have to let go of that delusion of who the other person is and see them as who they are, as an object, as a person, as limited as you. Um, there was something that I thought when the questions you asked that I wanted to say. Um, an idea of stability, sexual, sexual. I would say that again. I'm not. I don't know if the yeah. I mean, if that's a possible outcome, sure. Everything is a possible outcome. Like it's not like the negation, like the horoscope. So is it possible outcome? Yes. If the most likely outcome, I don't think it is. I think. I mean, I would hope most people navigate their relationships successfully. I guess. So I don't know if that would always be the case. I would definitely think if we were talking about sexual desire, for example, I would look at another million things before thinking that this is I don't know, something to have to do with childhood wounds or something like that. Like in 2026, sexuality usually is very connected to the present. Well, obviously there was childhood trauma or something, but it's usually very much connected to the present and what's going on and who the person is, what we're doing and where we're doing it. Where you were saying the thing about stability and the fair, my first thought was, well, would you be more comfortable having sex in the street with everybody around you, or in a motel with you or your partner? Right? Like, I mean, like it doesn't make sense to think that less stability kills the fire. I mean, I would say if we are safe, happy, well fed, and alone, I would say that's the best moment to have more lust, to have more sexual interaction. So, so to me, it didn't really make a lot of sense to see it like that either. I would definitely think that that's very much like a couple sort of dynamic question, rather than one of individual psychoanalysis or individual structure or individual structure. That is definitely better to look at the dynamic of the relationship rather than try to blame to blame one or the other person for having more or less sexual pleasure.
Okay, so let's finally hit the nowadays stuff. We've been walking on the path a little bit, but I'm sure there is a lot of things that are being practiced nowadays that are not safe yet. So, um, how actually this analysis work on a contemporary ways. Also, are there risks like pathologies linked to love?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to identify mature love?
Mm-hmm.
There's such a thing. So, what modern psychoanalytic view of love is?
Yep,
How
yep,
it's working now?
yep. But this is definitely like the next step on what we have been talking about so far. Um, with the pathology. Going, I would say they are pathology specifically linked to love. But I think something that definitely that we can take from Freud and keep it up until today, even that being in love does put you in a vulnerable situation. And I think that's interesting because, yeah, now we would say somebody who is mentally ill is in a vulnerable situation. Because we kind of still agree with Freud. The idea that if you're in love, you are in a vulnerable situation. Because you may be willing to overlook things that, not in love, you would not have overlooked. Or you may be willing to do things, or you may be easier to be coerced into things. And this is where vulnerability comes into play, right? It may be easier to coerce you into doing things that you don't want to do because you're in love. So I think that's kind of the thing that does remain until today. Um, we have definitely come to understand relationships as something that needs to be built carefully, that needs to be reflected on, that needs to be taken into consideration who both people are and what they want. So that I think definitely has sort of come into play until today, and the idea that there needs to be some sort of, I've heard this called emotional responsibility, where whatever relationship we have, if there is love in this relationship, there also needs to be a certain responsibility with what I do with this love, and how I am sort of interacting with this love and this relationship and taking care and not taking care of it, or exploiting it, not exploiting it, etc., etc., etc. So that is kind of the idea of 2026 now. Um, I think it is a challenge to balance sort of safety and connection. And I think that's kind of the problem that you see the most nowadays, where people want connection, but but they also want like extreme safety. So I want to be able to have a date with no risk of me being hurt. So that's impossible, my dude. And I think that sort of leads to a lot of paralysis, that leads to a lot of misunderstandings, that leads to a lot of issues that have. Um, so again, those are kind of the things that can go wrong, let's say, or that can be problematic around love, or that could be interesting to think of love as like sort of as a being in a vulnerable situation. But anyway, I would say that there's a specific pathology of love. I mean, if you are like pathologically obsessed with someone, I don't know if I would call that love to begin with. I would just call that pathological obsession. I mean, you can like it anyway, but I don't know if I would say that that's love. Like, I would look at it from the other side, from the side of pathological obsession. Um, Right, like the opposite, right? If we were to think of like a violent relationship or something like that, I could look at it from the side of like family violence or like abuse rather than from the side of love. You know what I mean? Like, again, it would make no sense for me to think of love first if there's violence. Now, with if the violence first, and then we can talk about the love. So, yeah, I don't know if I would say there is a pathology of love by itself. Something that maybe could be interesting to think about in terms of risks as well. And I think not a lot of people talk about it. I didn't even, not a lot of people talk about it. So, that I didn't even prepare this, but I wish I had. Love in mental illness. Not with, not as, but love in mental illness. When somebody who is mentally ill still has the right to fall in love, to find a partner, to make a life. And I think a lot of our modern discourse sort of says no. If you have something wrong with you, you fix it first, and then you look for love. I disagree with that. I think that has contributed to the loneliness crisis that we have nowadays. And you can look at our second episode, I think, about loneliness crisis, because it is almost like looking for perfection. Because I think I said this a couple of episodes ago. You can find anybody in the DSM-5. You can find yourself in the DSM-5. Well, I don't care who you are, chatter. You can find yourself in the DSM-5 because the DSM-5 covers everything. So to me, this expectation that you have to be a perfectly not mentally ill person before looking for a relationship doesn't make sense. I would sort of say, or go back to what I said earlier. Yes, there's definitely a need to take care of two people who are literally being vulnerable with each other. Absolutely. But I also think that something that we said at the beginning, love is foundational to sort of being human. Whether we see it as the psychoanalytic sort of view of finding pleasure and feeling complete, or we look at it from the relational view of love as being the end goal, of love as being sort of worth, what makes it worth to live in this world of suffering. Whatever view it is, everybody should have the right access to that love. So I think something that we're missing in our modern sort of discourse about mental health, it is talking about relationships and love in mental health, not from the pathologizing perspective, where how is being bipolar going to affect your relationship, but from the humanizing, from the loving, compassionate perspective of, yeah, I mean, your partner may be bipolar, but what do we do about this? There is no guarantee they are going to get better in your lifetime, so we have to do something else. Like, what do you do? You have bipolar. How do you find love? How do you have a functional relationship? Knowing that there is no guarantee that you will get better in the next 5 years. But that, I think, is what we're missing now. I think, well, I think that's kind of what psychoanalysis sort of adds to the discussion. This nuance where I don't care what your diagnosis is. Let's look at your experience of love and what it means for you and how you have constructed it with the people in your life. So that's something that I think psychoanalysis sort of adds to the discussion as well. This idea of love is something that is individual to you and the person that you are building a relationship with. And in that regard, what that love looks like for you and what role that love has in your life, that depends only on you and not anybody else. So that's kind of the idea there of love and psychoanalysis and love and pathology.
Okay. So well, I think it is a good time to go with the frequently asked questions of love and psychoanalysis.
Okay.
So this one is already answered many times. So, but I'm gonna put it anyways because repetition is important. So,
Foundational part of humanity.
yeah. So, does psychoanalysis say love is an illusion?
Yes, delusion, I would say, with a D. Delusion, yes.
Illusion. Delusion, no, an illusion.
Not an illusion, a delusion. Yes, like I said earlier, for psychoanalysis, especially for Freudian psychoanalysis, love implies being able to actually see the other person as they are. It implies overvaluing them. It implies seeing yourself as missing something that the other person has. So for Freud, yes, there is a delusion for sure. For the modern view, there is the idea that yes, there is also a delusion, but there is also real love behind that delusion.
So, why do I keep falling for the same type? I think that's already on the table.
Yeah,
So,
like
right?
we said earlier, because for first relationships form these very difficult to change models, and changing these models later in life usually requires like explicit voluntary work, like psychoanalysis, to change things and do things different.
What is transference love?
This is a very, again, very technical concept. Prospect love is, uh, so remember the client doesn't know you, right? Like you don't tell your life to the client, you are not like a person for the client, you're just a service provider. So if the client falls in love with you, they are not falling in love with you. They don't know you. There is no way they can fall in love with you. But what they are doing is they are sort of enacting another one of these repetitions. Again, I'm not seeing you. You are not my analyst. You are this perfect guy who's so smart, and so handsome, and so whatever. Delusion, right? And you are gonna save me because I am broken, and you have because you are a psychoanalyst, a psychologist, whatever. You are gonna fix me. But this is transference love. This is love that is coming from somewhere else and being projected into the analyst inside the room. This is part of how you change things. Because now that it's in the room, now that it's on the table, we can look at it. What do you mean you're in love with me? What do you like about me? Oh, you are so smart. How do you know I'm smart? Oh, you're a psychoanalyst. I mean, there are a lot of other psychoanalysts. I have met a lot of foolish psychoanalysts, so what do you mean? Why do you like smart people? We start looking at the pattern, right? That's the idea. So that's why it's important. Because it's a tool. It is what lets us see your repetition pattern in action and actually work on it and actually change it in the same space of the consultation room. So it is specifically a concept in the consultation room.
Okay, so can psychoanalysis explain why desire fades in long relationships?
In some long relationships, definitely not universal to all relationships.
Yeah, but I mean, there's obviously someone who wrote this is someone who has experienced it in a long-term relationship, and all of a sudden it's not getting any action. So,
um, okay, so again, I agree with this mistake. I don't know if this is a classic try, but you're thinking of this of love. Okay, so let's talk about both. Well, I kind of serious actually. The reason sort of sexual attraction may change from the psychoanalytic perspective uh, throughout a relationship is because desire, not lust, not sexual desire, the hunger for things.
something.
Yeah, the desire of which sexual desire is part of, because desire shifts, so it moves. So it may be that in one part of my life, my desire has turned itself over a sexual desire. And all I want is to fuck. But maybe as life goes on, my desire turns into something else. Maybe I now only care about my family. I really don't want to have sex anymore. I have 8 children, 16 grandchildren. What I want to do with my days is spend my days with them. I don't care about sex anymore. My desire has moved. But notice how this is not sexual desire that is moving. It is desire that moves from one thing to the other. Yeah, I would say that has to happen. I would say very much desire can move inside sexual desire. Desire can move inside a relationship. So this is not a necessary process. Well, I said earlier, like in some relationships, sure, but you can actually choose to not do that. When we say yeah, there is an element of choice here. That's kind of the sort of the end goal of psychoanalysis, is for you to be able to choose.
Okay. And the last one for today is, what is mature love in psychoanalytic terms?
Yeah. This is what we said earlier. This is precisely how it is presented. The moment where the delusion is broken. If we want to be like dramatic psychoanalysts, we can say the moment the other dies. That's literally how they say it. The moment the other dies, or the illusion of them in your head dies, then mature love finally can appear. Because you can now finally see the person as they are, and not as you think, and not in that illusion of love as they were seen through those lenses. Yeah. That would be how modern analysis looks at mature love.
Okay.
He would say that the other thing that happens, like during the illusion, that is the performance of love. That is kind of the show of love, the act, as an actor, the act of love, versus like actually interacting with the person. That would be mature true love.
Okay. Well, it's being constructive, and I think some of my, I don't know, early views on the matter have switched a little bit. So I was a little skeptical how to actually interpret it, what I was reading, but it's not nonsense. It's actually quite clear now.
Yeah, I think that's one of the issues
And
that psychoanalysis have. That it is because they are common words. We just interpret them, and the way we would interpret them in our everyday talk. But that's a misunderstanding. That's not what the writers are trying to write. They have a very late explanation of what they mean with that word.
yeah, well, so before anything else, I said, in psychoanalysis, love is not just who you choose; it is the unconscious story choosing through you, sort of, but
Yep.
more or
Yep.
less. There's all this
Yeah.
unseen that is coming out during the process, and you're trying to connect. I
Yep.
think
Yeah.
that's it.
That's literally the best way to say it. Yep. That there's this. Yeah. It is half of you the speaker, half of it is the psychoanalysis. I mean the unconscious. Sorry. That is just doing what it can do, what it has learned to do. Hmm. Um.
And so
Yeah.
far,
Yeah.
thank you, Josh. Thank you for this explanation of love through psychoanalysis. It's been enlightening somehow. And it's been less depressing than I expected because after reading, I was
Yeah, no, I
in a
try I
dark
try to
place.
make him less depressive as well. Yeah, no, I did because yeah, definitely Freud's unlikely view is yeah, kill yourself. That's the view. Yeah.
This is gonna be a personal question for the future, but were any of those actually in a healthy relationship when they wrote this kind of stuff?
No, no. Neither of them were. I think okay. No, she was married, but definitely never appeared much. Freud, he was yeah. He even ended up with some of his clients, so he's got a good example later. So yeah, good to keep in mind as well.
Yeah. So if you read it desperately, I don't know, depressing, maybe it's because the writer is also in a bad place.
Yeah, they didn't get to have children, so something may have worked there, but yeah.
Yeah, so difficult to learn and know love if you're not actually in the position of
Mhm.
giving to others, right?
Mhm. Okay, thank you as always. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope it was useful in some way with you around.
Yep. Peace out. Until next time.
Peace. Bye bye.
Bye.